Yo, what's going on, people? Welcome back to the channel. Now, it's been a hot minute since we've done a video. I went away for Christmas. I came back, went straight to the HLTV Awards. So it's been, a busy Christmas period, then into the start of the year. And I've only just got some free time to start getting back into the content. But, we will start a bit of a content schedule this year. We've got lots of things planned. So hopefully we're going to get through them in due time. Bit more of a regular upload schedule as well. But to start the new year, start 2024, I want to take a look back at 2023. Take a look back at my bold predictions that I made right at the start of the year and see how they ended up, whether they came true, successful, which in some cases they very much did, or, unfortunately in some cases unsuccessful as well. We're going to look back through all the predictions that I made and the honorable mentions as well and see how they ended up. So without further ado, we'll start with the honorable mentions. So to start the year, I wanted to start over in none other than the United Kingdom, over in the UK, my home as well, to kickstart my honorable mentions. I mentioned two guys at the same time. I'm going to break them down one by one from the UK scene. We'll start out with one of the more successful guys on this entire list, that of ZywOo himself. He was someone who was a little bit of a long shot coming in towards the year, someone that I know personally, and I know what level he could play at, and I knew there was probably a world in which he could step up into kind of a tier 2 international scene. But when I made the bold prediction video, he was playing only domestic CS within the United Kingdom. He just joined a UK organization called Coalesce. They've been playing fairly decently within the likes of kind of ESEA Advanced, for example, putting up some decent numbers individually. And ZywOo was someone who, for me, was one of the more promising talents that we had within the region. Someone who I knew had the ability to step up. And well, he did. 6 months after making that video, ZywOo went on to join Endpoint. None other, one of the biggest, and probably still remaining the most notorious organization within UK CS Counter-Strike. They've always been one of the biggest. They've always been one of the best as well, and always put up very, very good teams and, well, performances individually as well. And ZywOo did exactly that. Stepped up into Endpoint. They became a UK core once again. They went international for a while. A little bit of a mishap from them. They regret it. We know they do. They came back to the UK and things have only been up. Of course, he joined the likes of Surreal and Mighty Max to make that UK core once again, and really, honestly, stepped up in a massive way. ZywOo was playing very, very well when he went into his Endpoint, playing at a much higher level than probably he was used to as well, with kind of that upper echelon of tier 2 scene, so to say. But honestly, really, really well played from him. The end of the year with a 1.11 rating. Endpoint put up some pretty notorious results as well, with winning the Monsters Reloaded LAN right at the tail end of the year. So they went to LAN in Turkey, won that one. They put up good performances throughout the year within tier 2. Didn't quite make the RMR, which is a bit of a shame, but overall, I think this team went from strength to strength. And of course, recently with Heavy God joining OG, this is actually a really good opportunity for ZywOo coming in towards this year to actually step up once again. He's someone who I think now could probably fill out those hero roles that Heavy God was playing. So I'm actually quite excited. I think ZywOo is a very, very talented player and someone who, for me, I've always really enjoyed watching. So I'm excited to see what he can do into the year, but definitely one of the more successful ones. And alongside him, I mentioned someone who has become extremely famous, who wasn't beforehand, also in the UK scene. We knew him, we loved him. He's someone who's always been, I think, safe to say, probably the biggest talent within the scene, or at least one of them within the last few years. It's none other than Cypher, himself. Kai Watson, Cypher, what a start to the year he had. We had them making the RMR with Into the Breach, being the first team to ever make the RMR. But not only that, they go to the RMR and then are the first team from the UK to ever make a major. And not only a major, a legend stage in a major as well. I mean, Into the Breach, what a story it was. I mean, unfortunately, it ended straight at the legend stage. First round against Vitality, ended up winning the whole tournament. But Cypher made a real name for himself. And now coming in towards this year, at just 21 years of age, I think it's probably safe to say that, he's really made his stamp on the year's mark and also really put the UK scene on his shoulders. I think he put up, an incredible tournament at the Blast Paris Major. He was definitely one of the standout stars. You had ZywOo saying in kind of the post-game interview, he fucked me, in ZywOo's words.
Is that a start of something between you and Cypher? Especially early on when he was hitting the headshots.
Yeah, I mean, he fucked me. Sorry to say that, but he fucked me a lot, so.
Right? I mean, you can't really get any kind of a better testimony than that. And I think Cypher has really kind of redefined kind of entry fragging. He's someone who's become a real star in the making. And, unfortunately, the rest of the year wasn't exactly fantastic for him. He went through kind of ups and downs, obviously into the breach post that kind of major run. He then joined TSM, which at the time looked like quite a good decision. TSM are actually a very big organization. Granted, they definitely have their question marks about their management and how they run, but as an organization, they were a massive one. They've been in CS years and years ago with that Danish lineup. You know, Carrigan played for them and the rest. They came back into CS. It was this big idea. Had some pretty big players as well. Inters, Jax, and the rest. But it didn't work out. I mean, Cypher and Jax overlapped in terms of roles, so it made things quite tough there. And after kind of a fairly longish stint where there was very little success in that TSM roster, they arguably only got worse. He thankfully, to start off the year, joined none other than Bleed. So kind of a year after my bold predictions video, he had a massive peak, top 8 team in the world at the time. Dropped off quite considerably going to TSM, but it seems like he's back on the right track now. Joining the likes of Kassad, I think he's only going to get better. I think Kassad's the type of person, if anybody was going to bring out the best in Cypher, Kassad's probably the one I put the most trust in. So I'm really excited to see what 2024 looks like for him. Unfortunately, it won't include the first stage of the RMR. They got knocked out in the open quals at the time of recording this video. I'm not sure how they're doing in IM China. It's going on as I'm recording now. So hopefully we get to see Bleed make it to at least one of the early lands, but they've only been together for a few months. Cypher wasn't even the first choice as well. They originally wanted Max there, if I'm right in saying. So he was kind of maybe a slightly second thought, but I think Kassad can really bring out the best in him. But either way, a successful year for him. You know, you had them playing at the likes of Cologne. You had them at, the Blast Major as well, where they really made a name for themselves. Into the breach as an organization, but Cypher individually really took off this year. Now, for my next bold prediction, it wasn't quite as successful as the previous two. I had an honorable mention of NQZ. At the time, he kind of fluctuated in teams. He'd been, you know, a young kind of potential player who maybe could do something, but unfortunately, we never really saw it. You know, in 2022, when he went towards the likes of 9Z, we thought maybe something could happen here. Unfortunately, didn't. He kind of had this swap deal with Try's obviously somebody that we'll bring up a little bit later as well. He then went back to Double O Nation. It felt like under kind of the legends of the Brazilian scene that actually NQZ could start to find that form again. Unfortunately, it never really happened. Double O Nation, the team didn't put up the performances they were kind of meant to. They ended up getting dropped by the org and were going under the name Fake Natty for a while with Coldzera. Very funny name, has to be said. And actually played okay under that team. Then got picked up by the organization known as Legacy, but then he got benched individually. Wasn't putting up the performances. And then at the very tail end of the year, he moved towards Pain. Pain went through a massive roster shuffle. You know, Skulls and Zevi both leaving. It was a bit of a mess for Pain. They lost all their big stars, essentially. And NQZ got brought in. I think it's probably the right move for him. He needs to kind of go into a rebuild team where they actually build around a player like him. He is very talented, but unfortunately really wasn't the year that I think a lot of people would have expected out of him. He didn't have a terrible year. It was a 1.08 rating. He had some okay performances here and there, but, you know, not making it through qualifiers was pretty rough. They probably should have been at way more lands than they were. And then the lands that they were at, it just wasn't the performances that you wanted to see out of NQZ. I think he struggled a little bit. He's only young, though. He's 19 years of age, so he's still got kind of time behind him. He's still by no means kind of washed up. But, yeah, it really wasn't the year. So I think I can safely hold my hands up that while I had an honorable mention thinking that maybe we could see him revitalize the career a little bit, it didn't really happen. Now, this next player technically didn't count. And I mentioned this when I did my bold prediction video. I said he just about misses out on the requirements of what is a bold prediction, just in terms of his age. He was a little bit older than what you'd put as a bold prediction. However, I had to mention him just because he was kind of new to the scene and someone who I knew could put up some pretty decent numbers, having watched him in We Play Academy League. And that was none other than Artros himself. He's definitely made a name for himself. He started off the year, obviously, in Spirit Academy. They'd had a really decent showing in the tail end of kind of the We Play Academy Leagues. And then he got the call up to none other than Spirit, the main team himself, right? I think this is where Artros really came into his own. Spirit were a side who definitely always punched above their weight, especially compared to how young the core was with himself, Donk, which we'll come over to in a bit, and Zontix as well. They put up some really, really good numbers. And even getting an S-tier trophy with the BetBoom Dacia under their belt at the tail end of the year. Artros had a really good year, finishing in a 1.18 rating and putting up some incredible performances. For an AWPer as well, especially transitioning into CS2, he was actually one of the few AWPers that made AWPing on CS2 look easy, which is all credit to how good Artros actually is. He's a very, very talented individual. Unfortunately, He did get dropped by Spirit, but kind of understandable. When the opportunity for Spirit to sign Shiro came around, I kind of understand where it comes from. Shiro is not someone that you can pass up. You know, tail end of 2022 was the third best player in the world. You can't pass up that level of a player, especially when he's kind of benched himself from Cloud9 and is on the market. So Artros moved to Paravision, who's also, again, actually a pretty good team. Paravision, for those who don't know, actually have a fairly decent squad around them. You know, it's himself, Patsy, Kicker, Jerry as well from Fours, and then X5 or Zagev, basically the Steam Authenticator coders. A lot of you know him. It's actually a really good team. They should be able to put up some decent numbers. I think through the open quals of the RMR, they had some rough performances, but they're still very, very new. So I'm expecting big things coming out of them. But yeah, man, this Spirit team put up some really good performances. Artros individually stepped up in a massive way. So while he didn't quite fit the requirements, in my eyes, he deserves at least a bit of a shout out. I did shout him out in the bold prediction, and hey, well, he stepped up. Now, similar to what I kind of did with the United Kingdom, these next two I combined, right? It's two guys from who at the time were from the same team. Now, not so much anymore. It was that of Zevi and Skulls. Now, similar to Artros, Zevi was just above that age limit. He was actually 22 at the time of doing it, so he didn't quite fit into the requirements of what was a bold prediction, so to say. But I had to give him a shout out after seeing him on ESL Challenger Melbourne back in 2022, and I was hoping that he'd actually pick up that similar form heading into 2023, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't, you know, kind of the highest of highs that I sort of expected out of him. He ended the year on a 1.11 rating, which is fairly decent, and when Pain kind of imploded as a team, he got what I would personally say is an upgraded move as he moved on towards Fluxo, and now he can play under some of the bigger names within the region. So I think for him, and for me, it feels like an upgrade. He didn't quite, you know, fly out the gates in 2023, so to say, but at least he kept some consistency, and I think in 2024, maybe you can see a little bit more out of him. However, his compatriot from his country, that of Skulls, did have a good year, very good year. End of the year, a 1.16 rating, something which is, you know, pretty decent compared to the results, actually, that the roster had. And not only that, he got a move in towards Tier 1, now playing for none other than Liquid in their big rebuild. And I think this is a very exciting time for Skulls. Playing under the likes of Cadian, first of all, is huge. Playing under a team like Liquid of such support that they do. I think for Skulls, he's someone who I'm extremely excited about heading in towards this year. He's someone who I really think can step up. I think now into 2024, he kind of just falls out of the realms of bold prediction, but if I could, I would. He's someone who really can step up in a big way, and I'm excited to see him get that move. I really think he can step up and put a kind of his mark on the Tier 1 circuit. I'm really hoping it works out for him. He's an exciting young player, 21 years of age coming in towards this year, and I think off the back of what was actually a pretty good year from him overall, I'm excited to see what he can do. So as honorable mentions goes, I think we can kind of take a win here in somewhat of a way. Now, for my final two honorable mentions, unfortunately, it's not been the greatest year for these. These were a little bit more of a long shot, hence why they're kind of at the tail end of my honorable mentions, and the long shot didn't pay off. I'm happy to kind of hold my hands up here. Instead of Soulfly and Detour. Soulfly, of course, who started the year off in Sangao, ends the year teamless. Yeah, I think he recently has been playing with the Witches, and for those who may recognize the name, that's Smooya's kind of mixed team. It was playing with kind of Fear for a little bit, and a few kind of guys who are at the top end of FPL, let's say. They're actually a pretty decent team, all things considered. But yeah, you know, it's not been the greatest year for Soulfly, and for Detour, kind of more of the same. I really expected him to have a breakout year in 2023, and he just kind of kept the same level. Both just ended above that kind of 1 rating, you know, which is, it's okay, but it's not great. You kind of expect more out of them. And they both ended the tail end of the year, the last 3 months, at a negative rating, or a 0.9, whatever it was. So, you know, not the greatest in terms of results. I kind of wanted more out of these two. I think they had a lot of potential, but unfortunately, whether the teams weren't going well or individually the confidence was there, they didn't put up the performances I was hoping. However, they're both still young. You know, we've got Soulfly 19, Detour 20. They're both actually still considered youth players in terms of where this year's at. So I really do expect or hope to see a little bit more out of them. Soulfly, hopefully he can get a team and pick up that confidence again. And, you know, for Detour, he's been with Dynamo Eklot for a long time. I'm hoping he can, you know, push that team to being, well, at one point, they were actually one of the more scary teams within Tier 2. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's not kind of the same. But, you know, I can hold my hands up here and say this one wasn't kind of what I expected, what I wanted out of these two. But, you know, it's not the end of the world. Now, similar to kind of the tail end of my honorable mentions, we called them, the top 5 that we now get into, the lower down the list we get, the more of a long shot they kind of felt like. And I started number 5 with that of Try. Of course, he spoke about kind of his compatriot earlier. They had that trade move between kind of 9Z and ZywOo Nation with NQZ. And Try, of course, I thought, him going back to 9Z would be the start of maybe a little bit of brilliance. He had a rough 2022 on ZywOo Nation, didn't work out. I thought going back to 9Z, maybe we could see something out of him, but unfortunately, it wasn't the case. The Argentinian man really didn't put up the performances this year. It was a bit of a struggle, I think it's safe to say. And he ended the year being benched by 9Z, which was not what you want to see out of him. So he spent kind of the last few months of the year not playing any kind of competitive games at all. So it's not been great for him. The year's not been fantastic. He hasn't put up the numbers at all. I think the last time, if I'm right in saying it, I'm looking here, the last time he played a match was a tail end of September. In Pro League, where obviously 9Z unfortunately didn't do all that well, losing out to Movistar in that final game. So it wasn't the year for him. Pro League didn't go well. They benched him, and he hasn't had any sort of competitive CS since then. And from what I've heard and I've looked around, I haven't really seen any offers either, which is worrying. He's a 19-year-old guy who has played at a very good level, but unfortunately, this year wasn't to be. I got to catch him at ESL Challenger Katowice, and again, wasn't what I expected out of him. They got knocked out in the first round of playoffs. I think they probably should have got a lot further. They looked okay to start in the best of ones, and it fell apart in the best of threes. They got absolutely battered. And I'm right in saying I think it was by Virtus Pro. I was casting that game, and it was quick, to say the least. It wasn't the performance out of Try I wanted out of this year. I can hold my hands up here and say that this was not what we wanted to see from him. All things considered, not the year for Try. I think hopefully 2024, whether he gets reinstated back into 9Z or whether he gets a move to another organization, we'll have to wait and see. But with AWPing being quite difficult in CS2, we'll have to see. We'll have to see, man. It's not been the greatest year. No games for the last, 4 and a bit months. Things aren't looking good. So I can hold my hands up and say this one was a bit of a miss. They get slightly better, though, throughout the list. So we'll carry on. Now, number 4 on my list was Wrinkle, someone who I think had made a bit of a name for themselves. I'd covered him in 2 RMRs at this point, so I saw him at IM Rio when he was playing, or still is playing for Bait, and they took down Fnatic on Ancient. I was casting that one. It was probably one of the better casts I've done in a long, long time. A very, very fun match, and Wrinkle put up an incredible performance, and then over at the Blast Paradise RMR, again, Bait made a name for themselves, and Wrinkle individually was somebody who continued to step up, continued to be such a threat. And, he comes in towards this year only 19 years of age, so he still has a lot of potential behind him. But unfortunately, Bait as a team have sort of dropped off. They were kind of a top tier 2 kind of level competition. They were putting up, honestly, some pretty good performances and actually going head to head with actually some kind of tier 1.5 teams. It's not been that case at the tail end of the year. As a team, they've not been getting a whole lot of wins. They had a rough season in ESL Challenger League where they ended up kind of towards the bottom pack. They got dropped into relegation. Thankfully for Wrinkle and Bait, they ended up staying up. They won out in relegation, so they keep their spot in ESL Challenger League. But it still wasn't pretty. They still had a rough time. They struggled with results. But individually, Wrinkle didn't in terms of performances. He ended the year on a 1.15 rating. His impact was up towards the 1.2 area. He was putting up some actually decent results as an individual. It's all well and good that, though, if your team's not winning a lot. So I think for Wrinkle, I worry. They didn't make the RMR this time, and they were back-to-back in RMRs with Rio and Blast. Blast Paris, that is. But then, unfortunately, this one into PGL CS2, they haven't made it. So he hasn't got that opportunity once again for Bait to try and qualify to get stickers. So we'll see. I don't think it's been a bad year. I just think in terms of the level of competition that Wrinkle and that Bait have been playing against, it's not been the same level and kind of where we thought it would be at the start of 2023. So individually, actually put up some good performances. But now will he get that opportunity to shine at a high level? Will he get the opportunity to maybe qualify to lands? I don't know. It feels a little bit kind of up in the air at the moment just because Bait as a team seem like they're struggling. Now, number 3 on my list actually ends up being the most successful by quite some margin and had a real breakout year. It was none other than Yimfat from Mouse. I think this is somebody who, again, through following the kind of We Play Academy League, somebody I kept an eye on for quite a while. I've been following kind of an eye on him since he was about 15 when I first heard about him. Of course, Jimmy Sallow had an incredible year, really stepping up in a big way. Got the move from Mouse NXT to Mouse, the main team, and then continued to put up incredible performances. Mouse actually became one of the breakout teams of the year, and Yimfat was one of the most important factors into what made this team successful. Incredible performances coming through. Finished off the year at 3rd place at the Blast Premier World Finals. That in itself is pretty good. Losing out only to FaZe, which, fair play, it's FaZe. FaZe being one of the best teams in towards CS2. But I think the real highlight, of course, was that ESL Pro League win, the final Pro League on CSGO. And Yimfat was arguably one of the most important factors. His finals performance as well was none other than incredible. So I think this has been a really good year for not only kind of Mouse as a team, but individually Jimmy Salah, right? I mean, what a performance he ended up putting up. And, you know, if you look through some of the results that they managed to get, I'm just going to read them off here, right? So you got Blast World Finals, 3rd place. The CS Asia Championship, one of the first competitions within CS2, ending up 2nd, only losing out to FaZe. IM Sydney, 3rd as well. These are deep, you know, playoff runs here. And then, as we mentioned, that Pro League where they ended up winning out that one there, you know, the final Pro League that in that late kind of August time, just as CS2 was being released. It was a really, really good year, I think, for Miles as a team, but for Yimfat as a whole. So without a doubt, the most successful player on this list. And I think, of course, overall, ending 3rd on the rookies list. He had Immer above him, which, fair play, I think Immer can get the nod as a rookie who finished 2nd. And then Nertz, who finished 1st. Now, I love Nertz. I've known Nertz since Endpoint. But I think a guy who's already played a Pro League before this year doesn't count as a rookie in my eyes. I don't know how HLTV justified it. I'm not going to argue. It's when it comes down to it, it's their award, but I don't think Nertz counts as a rookie by any means. Somebody who has played in multiple S-tier events, including a Pro League with Endpoint, I don't think, in my opinion, counts as a rookie. He's been dominating tier 2 when he was with Endpoint for a long, long time, so I don't think he counts. Immer, I can give him the shot, and probably, you know, of course, if Nertz wasn't there, Immer would have taken the spot. Maybe Donk could have been in that top 3 as well. You know, he's definitely somebody that a lot of people spoke about, even though he didn't have as many LAN performances. But yeah, Yimfat, very good year, really good stats, of such a consistent rifler. And actually, in terms of stats, ended the year on a 1.18 rating. In your first year of Tier 1 Counter-Strike, stepping up from Academy Counter-Strike into Tier 1 and ending on a 1.18. Yeah, incredible. You know, 0.59 DPR, right? Which in itself is a nut stat. KAST, 76%. Again, in terms of where the spectrum lies in Tier 1, that is towards the absolute upper echelon. So I think for me, somebody that I've really respected as a rifler, he's come into his own. And for someone who's kind of so quiet and modest, not that way in the server at all. So I'm really happy to see Yimfat step up in a big way. And hey, he's become one of the most notable riflers we've got at the moment. And only 17 years of age heading into 2024. Sky's the limit for this kid. So very happy to see him do well. Now we're heading towards the top 2. And of course, I think the second on this list was, at the time, no surprises to anybody. Somebody who had been putting up incredible numbers within kind of the tier 2, tier 3 space, but also playing under a kind of a titan like Na'Vi with Na'Vi Jr. I don't think it's a surprise that we put Hedrick on this list. He was somebody that a lot of people had a lot of high hopes and expectations for, and in some ways, he delivered as well. He was somebody who I think at a time was seen as actually one of the biggest prospects within the region. He joined NIP, he got his tier 1 move. Unfortunately, it wasn't all kind of sunshine and rainbows in NIP. They actually struggled in terms of performances. The consistency wasn't there. They had some very much ups and down moments, but I think Hedrick as an individual didn't actually do terribly. He took a little bit of time to get kind of off the ground running when he joined in towards tier 1. I think joining not only at tier 1 level, but also then when you go into an international roster as well, being a Ukrainian guy speaking Russian before, and then going international speaking your second language, then going to tier 1 too. A lot of these aspects that come together makes your life quite difficult at that level. So I think I wasn't expecting him to be, you know, this breakout star, maybe the way that Yimfat was. But he actually didn't put up bad performances. You know, he had a 1.09 rating for the year. He put up some decent performances. And he had his moments of glory where we can actually see sort of what Hedrick was all about. Unfortunately, Nip didn't have the year that we were expecting out of them, but he still is only 19 heading in towards this year. And there still is a world in which we can see him put up some okay performances. They had these moments here and there where we saw something come to fruition, but it really wasn't to be, right? It wasn't the year that we wanted on Nip. I think they went from being kind of a top 10 team in a way to really dropping off quite considerably and becoming kind of a tier 1.5-ish team. Something that we didn't really expect to be that level of a fall from grace. However, I think there's definitely room for recovery and redemption heading in towards this year. And I think Hedrick, for me, is still impressed. I still think he's someone who can deliver at a top level. It's just, for me, it feels like kind of comfort and confidence. If that can happen, then we can see Hedrick thrive. But it wasn't a terrible year. It wasn't fantastic. Didn't really win anything. But when it comes down to it, I still think we can see a little bit more of him in towards this year. So I'm going to take it as a win. Stepped up into tier 1, into his second language as well, and did okay. I'm taking it as a win. Now, last but certainly not least, number 1 on my list, I put as Regali. Regali is somebody that I've seen for a while who've been putting up some really good performances within tier 2. Obviously, when he played for Copenhagen Flames, he was, without a shadow of a doubt, the star on that team. And I think it was a shock to everybody, myself included, when he got benched. It was a weird decision. You know, he's someone who is Romanian, but he speaks Danish, having grown up in Denmark. And when he got benched by Flames, it wasn't kind of a language issue or anything of the same. It felt very weird. He'd easily been the best player on that team. And the second they benched him, the team sort of fell apart. They did awfully following, and then, you know, soon after, unfortunately, as an organization, closed. So you really do hate to see it. But I think overall, Regali is somebody who continued to actually be quite impressive. He got his move to I wouldn't say tier 1 team. I'll call them tier 1.5 in that of OG. OG are a team who, unfortunately, at the top end, get battered, but they batter kind of everybody below them. When it comes to tier 2, they normally put up very good performances. They play a lot of Counter-Strike within the kind of the tier 2 and online space. They were playing within CCTs. We saw them playing Brazy Party as well. All of these sort of tier 2, tier 1.5 tournaments where you'd expect OG to put up okay performances, and they did. And even alongside that, they had, you know, dotted in here and there, a couple of actually fairly okay lands. We had Katowice, we had Cologne, and all the rest. Granted, the performances weren't great, but they were there nonetheless, right? Playing within kind of the best of the best. Regali is somebody who actually did step up in an okay way. He actually put up some fairly decent performances individually. I think it's been about adjusting to the top level. He finished the year on a 1.12 rating. His KASD was 72%, which is, it's okay. It still remains in kind of the good category, but only just on the cusp there. And a DPR of 0.6 is actually pretty decent, especially for an AWPer as well, all things considered. But I think when it comes down to it, Regali, it's been an adjustment period. OG go through roster changes every 2 minutes, and I think it's very hard to find consistency as a team and as a player when you have roster changes here, there, and everywhere. So I think for Regali's performances, you can actually take a lot of successes from it. You can take a lot of these with a kind of a grain of salt just because of how kind of topsy-turvy they've been. So I think all things considered, we could take some wins. So OG, you know, starting off this year, they've qualified now to the closed quals for the RMR. If they can get through that, going to the RMR would be big for them. And then if they can make pushes towards a major, that'd be huge. I wouldn't expect to see OG out of the major just yet. They've just signed Heavy God from Endpoint. You know, it's a new roster, probably a slightly new system, all things considered. They've gone through a lot of changes, and still a lot more needs to be fixed before I have faith in that OG team. At the moment, they seem sort of still like a feeder team to tier 1, but they feed off tier 2 teams, if that makes sense. So they're kind of in that middle ground at the moment. They're a very good development team for tier 1, but I'm not expecting them to see them at the upper echelon of tier 1 anytime soon. But Regali individually is someone who's still actually impressed me. When you saw him play at that top level, you could see kind of the thought processes there. You could see him actually putting up individually some pretty good performances. So I'm hoping we can see something out of him in towards this year. But as a bold prediction goes, I'll take a small win here. I'm not going to, you know, being relatively modest, I don't think it was, you know, a massively fruitful year. Probably not the way I expected, putting him number 1 on this list. I actually expected Regali to go from strength to strength. With how well he played in Copenhagen Flames within tier 2, I expect him to then step up into towards tier 1 and continue the same trajectory. It wasn't the case. It was a little bit up and down, but I think a lot of that kind of does still come down to OG being quite a turbulent team. So I'm not going to write him off just yet. And he's still only young. He's 21 years of age. He's playing still in a good level. And of course, with OG now being signed on as a kind of an associate team in towards Blast, I actually think there's a good world in which we can see them play more consistently at those top level lands, and maybe something can come forward from this team. However, I think it's safe to say without a shadow of a doubt, Yimfat was the absolute success of this list. And the loss that I definitely took was not bringing out Donk. I'd actually casted Donk a bunch of times, but when I watched the We Play Academy League, Artros was very, very talented and someone who I thought maybe had a little bit more of that maturity behind him. I can hold my hands up. I missed out on Donk. Donk should have been on this list. Easily should have been in the top 3. Maybe, you know, if I was to redo the list now, Yimfat still remains number 1. Donk should have been number 2. Maybe we can start making conversations about kind of like the likes of Headtrick, for example, but I definitely missed out on a few that definitely should have been in there. But all things considered, it's so hard to predict these youngsters coming in towards the top level of the scene. However, we're going to do it again in 2024. The video will be coming out some point next week. I've already compiled the list. It's done. It's locked in of who my top 5 are and a couple of honorable mentions. I'm going to reduce the honorable mentions list. I'm going to make it maximum 3 honorable mentions coming through. But we've got my list of 5 already locked in. So that video will be coming out next week. But for that, we are done. So overall, I think a relatively successful year. I think some of the honorable mentions did better than expected, the likes of Cypher and ZywOo, for example. Some of them not so much, with the likes of kind of detour towards the tail end. Into the top 5, more the same. It wasn't the greatest year for Try. We're not going to beat around the bush there. But we had our successes with Yimfat. So we can take some wins, we can take some losses. In this game of predictions, it ain't too bad if you're getting some hits and some losses. With that being said, though, we are done. Thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure. If you're new around here, please do hit subscribe and all of the rest. Plenty more videos coming out this year. We've already got 3 in the work. So the content's going to be regular. Thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. See you soon.